GTI Jacob Bond Performance. We're going to change some spark plugs on my Mk7 and do a compression test to see where the health of the engine stands. So I've got an old antique snap-on compression tester here, but doesn't necessarily have to be a name brand gauge. You're not really looking for a really accurate reading. What's most important is that all 4 cylinders are close to one another. So just to throw a number out there, 190, 192 psi across the whole board would be what you'd be looking for. So I know there's a really broad range. I don't have the spec in front of me. I guess I'll look it up after. My son's over here dropping stuff. Say hey, buddy. Hi. Yeah, so you're looking for consistency, not so much a dead-on number. Obviously, this antique gauge might read a little bit different than what the dealership's got kicking around. So don't get caught up too much on the numbers. You're basically looking for consistency. So another thing with spark plugs, these are a side firing plug. These are Brew RS7 OEM plugs. These are my go-to. I'll actually be pulling out some Denso plugs from the car that came with my IS-38. So we'll be seeing how those look and switching back to the tried and true OEM Plus plugs that I run. Both sets of plugs, one's coming out and the ones going in, are 1 heat range colder than stock. What that does for a tuned vehicle is for every 100 horsepower you go up, you should go 1 heat range cooler, just because with horsepower comes higher cylinder temperatures, and you don't want to induce pre-ignition or issues with that are heat related. So that's the reason for that. Also, the side firing plugs are not able to be gapped, but I do always check them with feeler gauges to make sure they're in spec. Don't want to induce problems with plugs that are no good. So, little guy's making a fort over here out of boxes, and we're gonna pull the coil packs off. Be careful with the ground cables. Those are 10 millimeter. And if the engine's warm, the coil packs come out easier, so keep that in mind. As well as when you do the compression test, we'll be turning the engine over with this plug disconnected. So we're not going to have high pressure fuel to be able to actually start the engine. You don't want it to fire off while you're doing the compression test. You're just wanting to run the pistons up and down the cylinder a few times, and until you release this button on the gauge, it'll hold the highest reading. So I'm not going to get too technical with this video. I'm just going to kind of show you guys the end result. If you don't know how to change your spark plugs, I'm sure there's other videos out there on that, but I've basically given you the gist of it. The coil packs just pull straight out. Try to be careful with them. And like I said before, a little bit of heat in them does make things easier. So I'm going to get to work here. And all right, so the old plugs are out. Cylinder 1 had just a little bit of oil on the threads, so I tested it first. I cut a little recess in this piece of cardboard and just kind of tacked it on above the cylinders, just in case those cylinders blow a little bit of oil or carbon or out or whatever, just to try to keep that mess contained. It's bleeding down now, but when I got out of the car, we were right at 150 psi. All right, so we've got 150 on one. We'll move over to the next cylinder and continue across the board. Like I said, this is just kind of bleeding pressure off. It is an old gauge, so I'll continue on with that, and we'll see, hoping for consistency. All right, so the results are in. I've tested all 4 cylinders. These aren't super accurate numbers. It would be more accurate if I had someone out here reading the gauge. And it goes in increments of 5. So a little bit of guesstimation going on in there, but I'm happy with those numbers, so I'm not going to test it again. It also would make sense that as the engine cools and there might be a little bit less lubricant on the rings because, you know, we're just cranking it over slow. So I would expect to see a downward trend, whichever way you choose to work across the cylinders. Next time I do this, I'll work the other way and see if we can average those out. But for today's purposes, I'm going to call that good enough. Just a little peace of mind health check. While I'm in here, I've got good access to this piece. I did a video on these billet coolant flanges. So I'm going to take the easy access opportunity to throw one of these in, and my buddy Evan's coming for one this afternoon as well. So I'll be well practiced on that. Maybe we'll even do a compression test on his 2019 Rabbit Edition, which is also IS38, and see what his numbers look like. Couple other things to note for those of you that might be doing this for the first time. All Volkswagen connectors need to be pushed inward to like the tight position and compress these tabs to properly release them. You want to be very careful because I've never priced one out, but I can't imagine that this engine harness is cheap. So anything that's got a connector needs to be pushed in and button depressed to release it. If it's not released, don't fight it, just reset and try again. Any connector that has a multicolored tab, like these cam phasers over here, this tab needs to slide that way to release it and be able to depress it. So just be aware of all these things. This harness flips out of the way really easy just by releasing this from that coolant line. We've got connectors off here, 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 across all of the cam phasers, or well, whatever Volkswagen calls them, and the two over here, as well as the 4 coil pack connectors. I always make a point to keep my coil packs in the same spot. That way, if you find a problem with one of the cylinders, you're able to quickly identify which one might be your problem. But everything looked pretty good. Like I said, just a little bit of oil on the threads here. Nothing to be too alarmed about at 104,800 miles. So I actually went 800 miles over my self-prescribed 10,000 mile interval for plugs. Like I said, these are Denso, which I've never used before. Brew is my go-to. So these ones actually are not side firing. These ones would be gappable. You can see the difference there, where these fire at the electrode from the side, and the Denzos are the conventional style. Let me get you back in focus here. So just be aware ordering spark plugs from a questionable supplier like some Amazon resellers. I have heard of fake NGK and Denso plugs. So going with a reputable supplier like the dealership or FCP Euro will ensure that you get a genuine spark plug for your genuine high performance Econo box. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I really appreciate everybody that has. Working my way up towards 1,000 subscribers to monetize the channel. Once that happens, we're definitely going to get some kind of a race car project in here. This guy's been dying to do some sort of build. Not 100% sure what that'll be, but that'll be kind of a celebration for monetizing the channel. Last I checked, 88% of viewers are not subscribed. So if you're one of those guys, hey, it doesn't cost you anything to mash that button. So thanks for watching. I hope this helped. I hope your numbers are decently together like that. Now don't quote me on the cylinder order. I know some guys will crucify me if I didn't do my homework, which I didn't, admittedly. I'm pretty sure not the firing order, but the cylinders are numbered this way. I could be wrong. There's a 50-50 chance on that. Don't write a book in the comments about it, because honestly, for this application, it doesn't matter. All we're looking for is consistency in the numbers. And oh yeah, I guess I'll show that coolant flange where it's going to live, right there. So I believe that's a T30. I'll pop that off and show you guys what the billet one looks like in there, and that'll be a wrap. All right, so here we are, fired up. Not seeing any leaks from our new flange. Idling nice and smooth with the new spark plugs in. So yeah, that's a wrap. I did have to add about 16 ounces of coolant back. So I'll just have to keep an eye on the level. It's looking good now. It hasn't moved from where I put it. So just be aware of that if you are going to replace that coolant flange, that you will lose some coolant, and you'll need to dilute it 50-1. So just keep that in mind. Thanks for watching, guys.